year or a different era or epoch. And they have names for all of them. The geologic column, you know, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archaeozoic, and they got the Jurassic and Triassic and Permian, Cambrian. I'm familiar with all of that. You might be interested to know the only place in the world where you can find all 12 layers in order, the only place it occurs is in the textbook. The geologic column doesn't exist any place in the world in its entirety. If it did, it would be many, many miles thick. It simply isn't. It doesn't exist. It has been put together piece by piece and a little bit of imagination thrown in for glue. Charles Lyell is really the fellow who developed the geologic column. Many others got involved in this, Hutton, Cuvier, Steno, you know, I'm familiar with all that. But Lyell would be the primary culprit in this. The geologic column doesn't exist anyplace. The fact is, I would say the creationist interpretation is that the flood caused all these layers, or nearly all of those layers, to be deposited very rapidly. Just the earth turning under the moon, causing the tides, with no continents to stop them, the tides would become harmonic. The tides may be 200 feet in a worldwide flood. The rising and lowering of the tide waters would reshuffle all the sediments. You can get a jar of dirt out of the yard here. Well, Florida doesn't have dirt. You got to go north to get dirt. They got sand here. But get a jar of dirt, put water in it, and shake it up. It'll settle out into layers for you automatically. It's called hydrologic sorting. Denser particles go to the bottom. When Mount St. Helens blew its top in 1980, it blew 150 feet of sediment down into the Toutle River Valley. My sister lived right near there. I flew down inside the volcano a few years after it happened with my brother-in-law. Flew all over the area. Can Andrew get the slide projector on there? You can leave your lights on to videotape, but I want to show them a few things that were formed as a result of Grand Canyon. I mean, as a result of Mount St. Helens when it blew its top.
Wait, before you get to that, I need to know what these sediments arrive. What are they part of? If they were laid down in a year and there were no mountains yet, where the sediment itself come from?
Oh, the grinding up, the reshuffling, that's where sediments come from. There's no new dirt being added to the earth, to speak of.
So the original surface is just being worn?
Being reshuffled, yeah. Sediments do that. That's where, like the coal deposits, strip mines, we find coal. That, to me, was because the trees that were destroyed were rolling around and the bark, you know, rolled off, and most coal is made from bark. And the original earth would have had enormous layers, enormous forests, much bigger than today. Under double atmospheric pressure, plants, trees were huge. Of course, they only lived 1,600 years till the flood took place, so they weren't like the 3,000-year-old sequoias. They didn't have 3,000 years to grow.
Do you have an estimate of the depth of water that was added by the flood?
I wouldn't, but I know if the oceans weren't as deep and the mountains weren't as high, there's plenty of water now to cover it 2 miles deep. The Bible says the tallest mountain was covered by 15 cubits, which is about 25, 30 feet. That's how high the tallest mountain was covered. And then as the ocean sank down and the mountains arose, if the mountains rose up slowly, the water would run off slowly, leaving behind nice smooth mountains and big flat plains like Kansas and Nebraska. If the mountains rose up rapidly, like the Rockies, the water would run off faster, carving out features like canyons and, you know, Columbia River Valley, carving them out much faster.
Why would the mountains rise up now?
Well, the Earth is a thin crust. Everybody agrees with that. I mean, why do earthquakes happen now? You know, the plates are moving. The crust is not stable.
Plate tectonics.
Oh, yeah, there's plate tectonics. But it hasn't been...
You incorporate that in scientific creationism?
Oh, absolutely. I live right by the San Andreas Fault, California. There is no question. It's moving. All right? Ask the folks that live there. You can... You know, after an earthquake and your house falls down. Let me try focusing this just a little bit here. When Mount St. Helens blew all this mud down into the valley, it made so much sediment, and the sediment automatically stratified. This layer of stratified rock, you can see the layers in that, was formed in one day, 25 feet thick. The next time the volcano blew, a scalding hot mudslide cut across that sediment, wiped it out, cut it off, sheer cliff, standing straight up. 5 days later, it was hard enough to hold a sheer cliff. I mean, this stuff happens, okay? Mount St. Helens did that. All these fine laminations were formed very rapidly. Here the blast was going hurricane velocity, winds, racing across there from the blast of the volcano, and it formed all these layers rapidly. Snow does the same thing in a snowstorm. As the snow goes moving horizontally in a bad wind, you cut into the snowbank and look at it. It'll be stratified. The heavier flakes at the bottom in the sand, it'll automatically sort the particles for you. So the creationist interpretation is that all of that so-called geologic column took place rapidly. Right now, today, you can go see Mount St. Helens, and there are several canyons that have been formed there by Mount St. Helens. The canyons have sheer cliffs, 150 feet high, standing straight up, and they're all stratified, and they were all formed over the last couple of years. The mudslides went through some of the old lava flows that were solid rock. That scalding hot mud went through there and carved canyons 100 feet deep through solid rock in 10 minutes. because boiling hot mud is very abrasive. During the worldwide flood, the water would have had mud in many areas, you know, and muddy water is much more abrasive than regular water.
But it would have to be boiling hot to cut through it. I mean, you're talking about cutting through solid rock. You're not cutting through mud, you know.
I'm saying it can be done either way.
The Grand Canyon is a mile thick in some places, and it's solid rock. I mean, a mud flow is not going to do that in 10 minutes like you are talking about.
The top of Grand Canyon is higher than where the river starts. Rivers only flow downhill. The river flows through the bottom of the canyon. 1 mile up is the top of the canyon. The top of the canyon is higher than the source of the river. So one of two things has to be true. Either the river flowed uphill for millions of years to cut the groove deep enough, or the mountain slowly rose, Kaibab uplift, at the same rate as the river cut down. I think we're calling on the supernatural here, to assume that the rate kept pace.
I don't think so. The source of water for the Grand Canyon is the Rocky Mountains. So we have a considerable height to work with there before you get down to the present-day surface. So no matter what the original surface was, you still had that height and the snow belt in order to give you your initial river.
If you would look at the drainage pattern of the Grand Canyon, all the area drained by it, the source of the rivers that go through that canyon are lower than the top of Kaibab uplift.
How much?
I don't know how much lower.
You don't know the difference in altitude?
Several hundred feet. The top of the canyon is 5,000, I think 400 feet above the bottom of the canyon. Today, the erosion rate through Grand Canyon is very slow. No question. But today, we just have one little river flowing through there. At the bottom of Mount St. Helens, the canyons that are down there from the trees that were blown over, the log jams were every place. Get through some of this here. The rivers that were cut, the features that were cut from the, I guess it's on the previous slide carousel. I'll get the lights back on. Shut that off, would you, bud? The canyons that were cut because of Mount St. Helens exhibit all the features of Grand Canyon. The mud flows stratified everything very rapidly, hundreds of feet thick, and the canyons that were carved out look just like miniature Grand Canyons, and scientists watched them happen in 15 minutes. You know, so I think that's a mini example of what happened on a macro scale during the year-long flood.
Well, they've got a Grand Canyon on Mars that makes the one on Earth look like nothing. So is that assuming that there was a population on Mars that was smitten by a great flood at some point in time and wiped out?
Oh, no, that wouldn't have anything to do with that, I don't think.
Canyons form the same way, you know, in each case, so...
Well, no, I didn't say canyons form the same way in each case. I'm saying Mount St. Helens showed us that's how it could have happened.
Okay.
I think outer space is full of ice. Nobody questions that. There are ice meteors flying around, super cold snowballs. If an ice meteor collided with Mars, Mars gets hot enough to melt the ice, and it would run and flow and could form canyon features with